There were lights on and shouting coming from your house all night, dear. I thought you had come back early from your trip. My grandmother, Dona Eulalia, 82 years old, was standing on the porch of the house next door, watering her violets as if she had just commented on the weather. Her words hit me like a punch in the stomach. I had just parked in the garage after a whole month in Seattle, consulting on banking systems, living on bad hotel coffee and airport sandwiches. My house should have been empty for exactly 4 weeks. What screams, Grandma? I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. Screams of pain, son. I thought it was some kind of medical emergency. I almost called an ambulance on Tuesday. She continued watering, as if she were describing a cake recipe. And on Thursday too. Always after midnight. My name is Roger, I'm 31 years old, and I work as a senior information technology consultant. I spend half my life solving other people's problems and the other half trying to ignore my own. Especially those involving my family. Are you sure the screams were coming from my house? I insisted, knowing that Mrs. Eulalia never confused addresses. She has lived here for 50 years and knows every sound on the block. Absolutely. And they weren't normal screams, Roger. They were screams of someone in pain. She paused and looked at me with those blue eyes that have seen everything in life. I also saw people coming and going. Different cars. Sometimes more than 5 people at a time. My mouth went dry. What kind of people? I didn't recognize any of them. But they had keys. They came in as if it were their home. She finally stopped watering and looked at me directly. I thought you had rented the property or something. I hadn't rented anything. I hadn't given keys to anyone. Only my parents had a copy, for emergencies and to water the plants when I was traveling. Plants that, from what I could see from the garden, were perfectly cared for. The house was always very bright, continued Grandma Eulalia. All the lights on, loud music. The first time, I thought you had come back unexpectedly and were throwing a party. But then after the screams, she shook her head. It wasn't a party, Roger. It was something else. My stomach churned. I walked to the front door and put the key in the lock. It turned normally. I entered slowly, as if I were an intruder in my own home. Everything was spotless. Not just clean, but overly organized. My living room had never looked so tidy. The sofa cushions were positioned with military precision, the coffee table gleamed as if it had been professionally waxed, and there was a smell in the air that I couldn't quite place. Sweet, but pungent. In the guest bathroom, the towels were folded into swans. I've never folded a towel into a swan in my life. In the kitchen, my stainless steel sink was so clean it reflected my face like a mirror. It was as I climbed the stairs that I noticed the most disturbing detail. My bedroom was completely different. The bed wasn't just made, it was decorated with red rose petals scattered across the white sheets. There were burnt candles on the nightstands and an empty bottle of champagne on the floor. My blood ran cold. Someone had used my bed. Someone had turned my room into a romantic setting while I was 3,000 miles away, believing my home was safe. I grabbed the phone and called my mother immediately. Hi, son. How was Seattle? Her voice sounded too cheerful, forced. Mom, have you been here? Of course, dear. I watered your plants every day. By the way, you should repot that fern in the living room, it's getting too big. Did you bring anyone with you? Silence. A silence too long to be innocent. Why do you ask, Roger? Because my neighbor saw people coming in and out of the house. Several people. And she heard screams. Oh, that, she hesitated. Maybe it was the workers. I called some people to take a look at the plumbing in the kitchen. You know how these old houses make noise when they work on the pipes. Workers didn't explain rose petals on my bed. Workmen didn't explain empty champagne bottles in my bedroom. And they definitely didn't explain screams of pain in the middle of the night. What company did you call? I asked, testing her story. I don't remember the name right now, son. It was a friend's recommendation. But look, I have to hang up because I'm in the middle of a recipe. She hung up before I could ask any more questions. I stood in the middle of my unrecognizable bedroom, holding the phone, knowing that my own mother had just lied to me blatantly. As I looked at those rose petals scattered on my bed, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, the visceral feeling that my privacy had been violated in the most grotesque way possible. It wasn't just trespassing. It was as if they had desecrated the only space in the world I considered truly mine. If you're enjoying this story of mystery and family betrayal, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what I discovered in the next few hours was much worse than any plumber fixing pipes. Because when I went back to talk to Grandma Eulalia again, she told me a detail that changed everything. Oh, and Roger, your mother was always there too. She seemed to be organizing everything. Grandma Eulalia's information echoed in my head like a fire alarm. My mother wasn't just allowing strangers to use my house, she was organizing everything. I went back inside and called again. This time, it was my father who answered. Roger. How was your trip, son? His voice sounded strangely cheerful, as if he were trying to make up for something. Dad, I need you to be honest with me. What did you do at my house while I was away? Silence. A heavy silence that confirmed all my suspicions. Son, your mother will explain everything when she gets home. It was just a small gathering with some friends of ours. Gathering. My voice came out louder than I intended. Dad, I found rose petals on my bed and an empty bottle of champagne in my room. My neighbor heard screams of pain during the night. What kind of gathering is that? Look, Roger, he sighed heavily. You know how your mother is with her ideas. And after you refused to help your sister with her new house. This has nothing to do with my sister. I interrupted. You invaded my privacy. You used my house without permission. It wasn't an invasion, son. We have the keys. And technically, we didn't do anything illegal. Technically. That word hit me like a punch. My own father was using legal technicalities to justify turning my home into what exactly? Dad, tell me something. Did you charge these people money? The silence that followed was more revealing than any confession. I'm going to hang up now, Roger. Your mother can explain these things better. He hung up, leaving me with more questions than answers. But one thing was becoming clear. My parents had not only violated my trust, they had profited from it. I needed to understand what had happened. I searched the entire house, looking for more evidence. In the upstairs bathroom, I found empty packages of products I had never bought, intimate lubricants, expensive brand name condoms, even an empty bottle of something called sensory stimulant. My stomach turned. These weren't just meetings. They were sexual encounters. In my house. In my bed. The phone rang. It was my sister, Amanda. Roger, Dad told me you're making a big deal out of a little meeting Mom organized over there. A big deal. My voice was tense. Amanda, they turned my house into a brothel. You're exaggerating, Roger. It was just a little adult party. No big deal. Did you know? I asked, feeling an even deeper betrayal unfolding. Of course I did. Mom told me from the beginning. And before you complain, it was my idea. The world seemed to stop. My own sister had orchestrated this. Why, Amanda? Why did you do this to me? Because you have a huge house that sits empty most of the time, while Dan and I can barely afford the rent on our tiny apartment. Her voice was heavy with resentment. You refused to help us financially, so we found another way. You could have rented a proper place for this. With what money, Roger? Do you think it's easy being a mother of 2 young children while your husband works as a freelancer? You, with your consultant salary and your 3-bedroom house, have no idea what it's like to struggle. The conversation was taking a familiar turn. Since childhood, I had been painted as the selfish brother who had it all, while Amanda always needed help. Our parents fed this narrative, making me feel guilty for every achievement, for every moment of financial stability. Amanda, that doesn't justify what you did. You violated my privacy in the worst possible way. Privacy. She laughed bitterly. Roger, you're hardly ever home. This house is practically a mausoleum. At least now it's served a useful purpose. Useful to whom? So you can profit at my expense. We didn't profit at all. She replied too quickly, confirming that yes, they had profited. We only charged a nominal fee to cover expenses. What expenses? Cleaning, drinks, some accessories. Roger, You're making this into something much bigger than it is. I hung up the phone. I couldn't listen to any more excuses. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, trying to process the magnitude of the betrayal. It wasn't just about using my house. It was about the complete lack of respect for me, for my boundaries, for my trust. My parents raised me in a dynamic where I was always the strong one, the responsible one, the one who had to give in for the sake of family harmony. Amanda was always the sensitive one, the one who needed protection and help. When I bought my house, the pressure to share began immediately. "Why do you need so much space?" my mother would ask constantly. "Amanda barely has anywhere to put the kids' toys." "You could lend Amanda the guest room when Dan is traveling," my father would suggest, always subtly, never as a direct order. When I refused to sell the house to split the money with my sister, they didn't speak to me for weeks. Until, slowly, they began to forgive my selfishness. The price of their forgiveness was that I let them take care of the house when I traveled. Now I understood that their forgiveness had never been real. It was just a strategy to gain access to my property. The phone rang again. My mother. "Roger, dear, I think we need to talk in person. Can you come over?" "No, Mom. If you want to talk, come here. I want to show you exactly what I found in my own home." "I can't leave now, I'm cooking dinner for the kids. Amanda brought the little ones over for dinner." Sure. Amanda was there, probably preparing the official version of the story they would tell to convince me that I was being unreasonable. "Then we'll talk on the phone. I want you to explain to me how you organized sexual encounters in my house and thought that was acceptable." "Roger, it wasn't sordid. These were encounters between consenting adults, people we've known for years. People we trust." "Mom, I found evidence of sexual activity in my room." My neighbor heard screams. "This isn't a knitting circle." They were screams of, "Well, pleasure, Roger. Not pain. You're misinterpreting everything." The matter-of-fact way she said it made me sick. As if it were perfectly normal to turn your son's home into a place for orgies. "How many times has this happened?" "A few times. Always when you were traveling. We never interfered with your routine." "How many times, Mom?" "Maybe 10 or 12 times in the last 2 years." 2 years. They had been doing this for 2 years. And you charged people money? A nominal contribution to keep the house tidy, buy drinks, things like that. "How much?" "Roger, that's not important." "How much, Mom?" $200 per couple, per night. I did the math quickly. 12 gatherings, probably 5 or 6 couples at a time. They had made thousands of dollars using my property. You turned my house into a commercial swingers house. Don't be dramatic, Roger. It was just a favor for friends. Nothing official. Official enough to charge an entrance fee. "Look, if you're worried about the money, we can give you a percentage." I hung up before she could finish her sentence. That was it. They had crossed a line from which there was no turning back. It wasn't just about the money or even the unauthorized use of the property. It was about years of emotional manipulation culminating in the most intimate violation of my privacy. While I was working 16-hour days in corporate offices in other cities, my family was profiting from sexual encounters in the place I considered my sanctuary. And now that they had been discovered, instead of apologizing, they were trying to make me feel guilty for reacting. I sat in my living room, the same room where strangers had done things I didn't even want to think about, and I made a decision. They thought they knew me. They thought I would always give in, always forgive, always choose family harmony over my own dignity. But they didn't know the version of me that had learned to navigate the brutal corporate world of consulting. The version that knew how to document evidence, build solid cases, and execute ruthless strategies when necessary. I grabbed my laptop and started researching. Municipal laws on residential use for commercial purposes. Regulations on adult entertainment establishments. Tax issues related to undeclared income. Because if they wanted to turn this into a legal and financial issue, I was more than prepared to play that game. And unlike them, I would play to win. I spent the night researching city laws, but I couldn't get the natural way my mother had mentioned the screams of pleasure out of my head. As if it were normal. As if my house were a public place available for his hobbies. At 6 in the morning, I decided to investigate further. I started searching every room with detective eyes, looking for evidence I had missed on my first inspection. In the guest bedroom closet, I found items I had never put there: premium brand lubricants, sex toys still in open packaging, and what made my stomach turn, sheets that were clearly not mine, with stains I preferred not to identify. There was more. In the bathroom, I discovered a small built-in cabinet that I always thought was empty. Inside, fluffy towels with gold embroidery, expensive scented candles, and a basket of intimate hygiene products that cost more than my electricity bill. They hadn't just used my house. They had decorated it, invested in it, transformed it into a professional environment for their encounters. I picked up the phone and called my bank. "Good afternoon. I'd like to check if there have been any unusual transactions on my account in the last few months." "Sure, sir. I see some recurring transactions here. You made monthly purchases at Sensual Dreams and Adult Paradise, always for the same amount, around $300 to $400. My blood ran cold. They were using my credit card to buy the products. Can I have the details of those transactions?" "Certainly. The last one was 3 days ago. $417 at Sensual Dreams. 3 days. I was still in Seattle 3 days ago. I hung up and immediately called the card company, canceling the card and requesting a dispute on all unauthorized purchases from the last 2 years. The phone rang. It was Amanda again. "Roger, Mom told me you canceled the card." "That's ridiculous. They just bought a few things to make the house more comfortable while you were gone." "Amanda, they bought sex toys with my money." "So what? You didn't even use the card for that stuff anyway." My sister's twisted logic left me speechless. As if the fact that I didn't buy sex products justified them buying them in my name. "They stole from me, Amanda. For 2 years. They didn't steal. They borrowed. And look, since you want to make such a big deal out of everything, I'll tell you the whole truth." My heart raced. It wasn't just casual hookups, Roger. They recorded some performances for couples who wanted special mementos of their experiences. Nothing professional, just intimate memories. I felt the world spin. They recorded in my house? In your room, mostly. It has the best lighting and the most space. I collapsed into the chair. It wasn't just sexual encounters. It was adult content production. In my bed. With my sheets. "Amanda, you turned my house into a porn studio?" "You're being so dramatic, Roger. It was just a few amateur recordings to help couples remember special moments. Like wedding photos, only more intimate." "And you profited from it?" "The couples paid an extra fee for the recordings. $200 extra. But Roger, look, they used that money to help with my moving costs. Dan got that better job because we could pay for a technical course." The revelation hit me like a punch. They hadn't just violated my privacy and stolen my money. They had created a lucrative amateur pornography business using my property as a backdrop. How many videos were recorded? I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 over the last 2 years. Roger, please don't make this bigger than it is. 20 amateur porn videos. In my bed. With my face potentially captured in mirrors or reflections. Amanda, where are those recordings now? I don't know. The couples took copies, obviously. And Mom must have kept some as a portfolio. A portfolio. My mother had a portfolio of amateur pornography recorded in my home. I have to hang up. Roger, wait. I hung up and ran to the bathroom, vomiting everything in my stomach. When I was able to pull myself together, I called the only friend I could completely trust, Marcus, my college classmate who now worked as a corporate lawyer. "Marcus, I need your help. It's a complicated family situation." "Sure, what happened?" I told him everything. Every sordid detail, every nauseating discovery. Marcus remained silent throughout my narrative. "Roger," he said finally, "this isn't just a family matter. It's a crime. Multiple crimes." "What do you mean?" "Unauthorized use of property for commercial purposes, credit card fraud, possible tax evasion, unlicensed production of adult content, violation of residential zoning ban. Your parents could face serious legal consequences." "And what can I do?" "Document everything. Every piece of evidence, every conversation, every transaction. Then we'll decide whether you want to pursue this civilly or criminally. What if I choose the latter? They could go to jail, Roger. And your sister too, if we can prove she was an active participant in the scheme. After hanging up, I sat in my silent living room for hours, processing the magnitude of the betrayal. It wasn't just about money or property. It was about family. People I loved had turned me into a financial puppet to subsidize strangers' sexual fantasies. I grabbed my laptop and started creating a digital folder, Evidence Home Violation. I photographed every strange item, every product that wasn't mine, every sign of unauthorized use. Then I called a professional cleaning company that specialized in decontamination. I need a thorough cleaning. Change all the sheets, sanitize the mattresses, deep clean the carpets and curtains. Any specific situation, sir? Let's just say there was some inappropriate use of the property. We understand completely. We can be there tomorrow morning. While I waited, I made one last call. To my father. Dad, I want you all to come here tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon. All of you. Amanda, Dan, and the kids. Why the kids, Roger? Because I want them to see exactly what their parents and grandparents did at Uncle Roger's house. Son, there's no need to involve the kids in this. You involved me without my consent for 2 years. Now I'm calling the shots. Roger, we can talk this out like adults. Adults don't turn their son's house into a brothel, Dad. Adults don't steal money from their family to fund orgies. Adults don't film pornography in a relative's bedroom. The silence on the other end confirmed that he finally understood the gravity of what they had done. 2 o'clock, I repeated. And bring a lawyer. You're going to need one. I hung up before he could respond. For the first time in years, I felt like I had regained control of my own life. But what they didn't know, what none of them could have imagined, was that I had already documented much more than mere physical evidence. During my bank investigation, I had discovered something that would change everything. Because while they thought they had been clever in using my house and my money, they had made a fatal mistake that only someone with my experience in systems auditing could detect. And tomorrow, when they were all gathered in my office, they would finally discover the true price of underestimating someone who has dedicated his professional life to uncovering complex financial schemes. The cleaning company arrived at 8 in the morning, right on time. 3 professional women in immaculate uniforms and equipment that looked like it came from a forensic laboratory. Sir, based on what you told us on the phone, we've brought equipment for complete decontamination, said the supervisor, a 40-year-old woman with a military air about her. High-temperature steam, enzymatic products, ultraviolet light for fluid detection. Perfect. I want every surface treated as if it were criminal evidence. While they worked, I was in the office implementing the second phase of my plan. The discovery I had made during the bank investigation was devastating. It wasn't just the unauthorized purchases on my card. It was something much more serious. For 2 years, my parents had been reporting extra income on their federal tax returns. Income from domestic consulting services, provided through an LLC they had registered using my address as the company's headquarters. They had turned my property into the legal headquarters of an adult entertainment business without my knowledge or consent. I called Marcus again. Marcus, I need you to check something out. My parents have registered a company called Intimate Spaces Consulting LLC, using my address. I want to know all the legal implications of that. Roger, that's corporate fraud. If they registered a company at your address without your authorization, you could have problems with zoning, taxes, even civil liability if something goes wrong with their consulting business. What if I prove I didn't know anything about it? Then they face federal fraud charges. We're talking federal prison, Roger. I hung up and continued my investigation. I went to the state website to check corporate documents. There it was, Intimate Spaces Consulting LLC, registered 2 years ago, with my address as its headquarters, my mother as CEO, and my father as CFO. They had forged my signature on official documents. My cell phone rang. Amanda. Roger, Mom told me you're making an unnecessary scene. Look, we can work this out as a family. There's no need to involve lawyers. Amanda, you registered a company in my name without my permission. That's a federal crime. What company? Intimate Spaces Consulting. You used my home as the headquarters of an illegal business. Silence. Amanda. It was Dad's idea. He said it was just for tax purposes. That it was no big deal. You forged my signature on federal documents. Roger, please. You know Mom and Dad don't understand these bureaucratic things. They thought it was just some unimportant paperwork. Unimportant paperwork that makes me a partner in a prostitution ring. It wasn't prostitution. It was adult entertainment. Amanda, you were charging couples to have sex in my house and record pornography in my bedroom. What do you call that? She hung up. I spent the rest of the morning documenting everything. I photographed every LLC document, every bank transaction, every piece of physical evidence the cleaning crew had found before removing it. One of the employees called me into the bedroom. Sir, we found this behind the headboard. It was a small camera, still working, with a memory card. My blood ran cold. They were recording without my knowledge. It looks like it. The camera is set to continuous recording when it detects movement. I plugged the memory card into my laptop. There were dozens of video files, some several hours long. I didn't watch the videos, I couldn't, but I saw enough of the timestamps to confirm they had recorded every sexual encounter that had taken place in my bedroom over the past 2 years. I called Marcus immediately. Marcus, they installed hidden cameras in my bedroom. They recorded everything. Roger, this is a legal production of pornography. If they sold these videos without the consent of the participants, we're talking multiple federal charges. How do I proceed? Don't watch the videos. Don't copy them. Call the police now and hand everything over as evidence. This protects you legally and ensures they face the appropriate consequences. I hung up and called the police. Within 30 minutes, 2 detectives were in my living room, collecting evidence. Sir, based on what you're showing us, we'll need to investigate possible unlicensed production of adult content, corporate fraud, unauthorized use of property, and violation of privacy laws, said Detective Martinez. Are you going to arrest them? We'll do the investigation first. But yes, if we confirm all of this, they will face multiple charges. After the police left, I sat in my newly decontaminated office and called my boss. Steve, I need a few more days off. Urgent family situation. Sure, Roger. Is everything okay? It will be. I spent the afternoon preparing a presentation. Not just any presentation, but a complete dossier on my family's scheme. Timeline, financial evidence, legal documents, all organized as if it were a corporate audit case. Because that's exactly what it would be, a complete audit of his actions, with consequences to match. The phone rang at 5 in the afternoon. My mother. Roger, dear, we need to talk before tomorrow's meeting. I think you're misunderstanding the situation. There's no misunderstanding, Mom. You turned my house into a brothel, forged my signature on federal documents, and recorded illegal pornography in my bedroom. The police are already investigating. The police. Her voice rose. Roger, you called the police on your own family? You committed federal crimes using my property. I protected myself legally. Son, you're destroying our family over a misunderstanding. You destroyed our family when you decided to use me as a financial puppet for your sexual fantasies. We did it to help Amanda. She was desperate. You refused to help your own sister. Mom, you turned my home into a prostitution and pornography ring. Amanda didn't need that. She needed to get a job. You're cruel, Roger. You've always been selfish, but I never thought you were cruel. The meeting is at 2 in the afternoon. Bring a lawyer. I hung up. By 7 that evening, I had everything ready. I had documents organized into separate folders, financial evidence, forged legal documents, a timeline of events, photographs of the house before and after the cleanup. I had also prepared copies of everything to give to each family member. It wasn't just revenge. It was accountability. They had spent 2 years treating me as if I were responsible for the financial well-being of the entire family, as if my refusal to sell my house to subsidize Amanda was a personal moral failing. Now they would find out what happens when someone with experience in corporate auditing decides to thoroughly investigate a family financial scheme. Marcus called at 8. Roger, I just spoke with Detective Martinez. They found evidence that your parents sold some of the videos online through an amateur adult content platform. My stomach lurched. They sold them. Apparently so. They created fake profiles and sold authentic home videos of real couples. They made thousands of dollars in additional profits. Without the consent of the people in the videos. Exactly. That makes this a much more serious case. Sexual exploitation, invasion of privacy, online fraud. We're talking years of federal prison time. After I hung up, I stood in my clean kitchen, looking out the window at Grandma Eulalia's house. She was watering her violets again, as she always did in the evening. An 82-year-old woman had more moral integrity than my own parents. She told me the uncomfortable truth about what was going on in my home, even though she knew it would be difficult to hear. While my family built an empire of lies at the expense of my trust. Tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon, when they arrived expecting to convince me that I was overreacting, they would discover that they had completely underestimated someone who dedicates his professional life to uncovering complex corporate fraud schemes. If you've made it this far in this story of family betrayal, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow you'll find out exactly how an audit consultant dismantles a family scheme the same way he would dismantle corporate fraud, with surgical precision and devastating consequences. The difference is that this time, it wasn't just a job. It was personal. 2 o'clock sharp. The doorbell rang. I opened the door and there they all were, my parents with tense expressions trying to look confident, Amanda holding her 5-year-old son by the hand, Dan carrying the baby in his arms, both avoiding my gaze. Come in, I said calmly, gesturing toward the living room, which now smelled of industrial cleaning products instead of bodily fluids. They settled onto the couch, the same couch where strangers had done things I'd rather not imagine. The irony didn't escape me. Roger, my father began, before you say anything, we want you to know that we never meant to hurt you. Really? I picked up a neatly organized folder from the coffee table. Because I have here documentation to the contrary. I opened the folder and began distributing copies to each of them. Page 1. Complete chronology of all unauthorized activities on my property over the past 2 years. 17 documented events, including dates, times, and approximate number of participants. Amanda leafed through the papers with growing discomfort. Roger, this is. Page 2. Bank record showing $83,000 in unauthorized transactions on my credit card. Sex products, premium beverages, recording equipment. My father turned pale. Son, we can explain. Page 3. Incorporation documents for Intimate Spaces Consulting LLC, registered at my address without my knowledge or consent, including my forged signature. The silence in the room was deafening. Dan finally spoke. Roger, maybe we can work this out as a family. There's no need to. Page 4. Screenshots of the pornographic website where you sold videos illegally recorded in my bedroom. 22 videos, total revenue of $14,000. Amanda dropped the papers. Where did you get this? I'm a systems audit consultant, Amanda. Tracking digital financial flows is literally my job. My mother tried one last emotional gambit. Roger, honey, you're destroying our family over a misunderstanding. We can give the money back, shut down the company, forget all about it. Misunderstanding. I grabbed my laptop. Let me show you what I found out last night. I opened a detailed spreadsheet. You didn't just use my house and my money. You created a systematic business. A professional website, a booking system, even a loyalty program for regular customers. I turned the screen so they could see it. Here's the schedule. Every time I confirmed a business trip, you sent out promotional emails announcing new dates available. You monetized my professional calendar. My father tried to get up. Let's go. We don't need to hear this. Sit down, I said with a firmness that made them back away. Because now comes the interesting part. I picked up another folder. I found out that you didn't report this extra income on your federal tax returns. $83,000 in products, $97,000 in event fees, $14,000 in video sales. That's tax evasion on a scale that could result in federal imprisonment. Amanda started to cry. Roger, the kids, you can't do this to us. I didn't do anything, Amanda. You did this to me. That's when my phone rang. It was Detective Martinez. I answered on speakerphone. Sir, we just got a warrant to seize the recording equipment and financial records. We'll be there in 15 minutes. My parents looked at each other in panic. 15 minutes? My mother repeated. Yes. And we've also obtained authorization to search your residence for additional evidence related to the unlicensed pornographic production scheme. I hung up the phone. You have 14 minutes to tell me everything. Every detail you left out. Because when the police arrive, any additional lies will become obstruction of justice. Dan finally exploded. Roger, you're being ridiculous. It was just a source of extra income. We didn't hurt anyone. You didn't hurt anyone? I picked up the last folder. This is the list of participants who have contacted me in the last 24 hours, after the police informed them about the non-consensual recordings. I began reading. Jennifer and Mike Thompson are suing you for invasion of privacy. Sarah Chun called off her wedding after her fiancé found out about the videos. The Rodriguez couple is getting a divorce because the wife didn't know she was being filmed. Amanda stopped crying. They knew about the cameras. They knew about the cameras you showed them. They didn't know about the 3 hidden cameras you installed to capture more intimate angles. My father collapsed on the couch. Roger, please. We're his family. Family doesn't turn their son's house into a brothel. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't forge signatures on federal documents. The doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw 3 police cars. They're here, I announced calmly. As my parents panicked, I walked to the door with the calmness of someone who had meticulously prepared every detail of the situation. For 2 years, they treated me like a financial resource to be exploited. An obedient son who would always give in for the sake of family harmony. But they completely underestimated what happens when someone with experience dismantling complex corporate schemes discovers that his own family has turned him into the center of a criminal operation. I opened the door to the detectives, who entered with warrants and seizure equipment. Gentlemen, Detective Martinez said, looking at my parents, you have the right to remain silent. As he read the rights, I watched Amanda finally understand that she was no longer the spoiled sister who always got everything at the expense of her selfish brother. She was an accomplice to multiple federal crimes. And for the first time in her life, the consequences of her actions would not fall on me. 6 months later, I got the final call from Detective Martinez. Roger, the case is closed. Your parents have been sentenced to 2 years in federal prison for corporate fraud and illegal production of adult content. Amanda got 18 months for aiding and abetting. The $300,000 fine was imposed, and all assets of the LLC were confiscated. I hung up the phone and looked out the window of my new apartment in Portland. Smaller than the previous house, but genuinely mine. The transformation had not been just theirs facing the consequences. It was mine too. During the trial, 43 people testified as victims of the scheme. Couples who discovered the non-consensual recordings, participants who never knew they were financing my sister's debt, neighbors who endured years of nighttime disturbances. My family hadn't just violated my trust. They had created a trail of damage that affected dozens of lives. Your Honor, I said during my closing statement, I don't seek personal revenge. I seek understanding that family trust is not a license for financial exploitation. The judge agreed. In his sentence, he stated, this case represents a fundamental violation of the most basic family ties. Using a son's professional travel vulnerability to create a criminal business is particularly reprehensible. Dan lost custody of the children when social services found out he knew about the scheme. The children went to live with their paternal grandparents in another state. Grandma Eulalia visited me last week. Roger, dear, you did the right thing. Family should protect, not exploit. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far, Grandma. Overreacted. She shook her head. They turned your home into a dirty business for 2 years. You just uncovered the truth. She was right. I hadn't destroyed my family. I had exposed the destruction they had created. The money recovered, more than $200,000 in unauthorized merchandise, LLC profits and fines, was donated to organizations that help victims of sexual exploitation. I didn't want to profit from the sordidness my family had created. I moved to Portland 3 months ago. I work remotely now, choosing a company that values transparency and ethics. It's ironic how investigating corporate fraud became easier after dismantling my own family's fraud. I don't talk to my parents. They've tried to call me a few times from prison, but I let it go to voicemail. The last message from my mother said, "Roger, we hope you forgive us someday. We did it all for the love of our family." Love for your family doesn't turn your son's home into a brothel. Love for your family doesn't steal. Love for your family doesn't forge signatures. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean accepting unacceptable behavior. It means choosing not to carry the poison of resentment while still demanding appropriate consequences for destructive actions. 6 months ago, I thought having a family meant always giving in for the sake of harmony. Now I understand that real family protects and respects, not exploits and manipulates. If this story of family boundaries and justice touched you, subscribe to the channel for more stories from people who discovered that sometimes the family we choose is more valuable than the one we inherit. Last week, Grandma Eulalia sent me a photo. She had installed security cameras in her house. "I learned from my grandson," she wrote. "Surveillance prevents problems." I smiled when I read it. She was 82 years old and still learning lessons about self-preservation. As for me, I learned that having standards isn't selfish. It's survival.